Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. My guest today is Kevin Berson with Kinected, a mergers and acquisitions, exit planning, strategic advisor, and public speaker with 15 plus years of experience helping entrepreneurs value, market, and sell their businesses, closing complex M&A transactions. Kevin, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I always like to start with your background and how you got into it. So it gives listeners some context. You and I know each other because we're both local. You're based in Encino. I'm in Los Angeles, and we've known each other for a number of years, but I know you have a background as an entrepreneur. And so tell us your story. Like, how did you get into this business?
Yeah, sure. So, like most people, certainly was not a straight line career path to get where I am. I went to UCLA and went into consulting initially. Didn't really know what consulting was going to be. I thought I was going into strategy consulting, but it turned into technology consulting, and turned out to be a great thing for my career. I spent the first 6 years at Arthur Andersen, and we were implementing ERP systems, specifically SAP, for manufacturing and distribution companies. So I learned a lot about business and a lot about supply chain through my time implementing systems. We worked on Oakley sunglasses, a division of Mitsubishi, a division of Sony, and really did really well at Andersen. And then 2002 comes along, and you hear about this Enron scandal. Ended up taking out the whole company seemingly overnight. 100-year-old company. 100,000 white collar people just kind of scrambling to figure out their next move. I was recruited to go to Technicolor, which was another, it was a $5 billion publicly traded company at the time based in France. And they brought me on to run their worldwide SAP initiative. They're trying to standardize all the systems on SAP. And they made a deal with me, and they said, "Hey, we need you." I started my MBA at UCLA, and they said, "Hey, you can't go. We have an offer to make. We have an offer you can't refuse. So we want you down in Mexico for a year. We want you down in Guadalajara. We're going to give you a budget. You're going to hire IBM. And if you run this project on time, under budget, we'll pay for your MBA." I said, "All right, that's a pretty good deal." Go down to Mexico. I worked my butt off for a year. Very complicated project, but one of the things I'm really happy in my career that I did. This was the kind of prototype implementation. It had to go well, and it did go well. So I came back to after that project was done, and had a pretty good reputation, started my MBA, started taking finance classes. And then Technicolor gets a new CEO who turns out to be an investment banker, and he wants to radically reposition the company through M&A. So he brings on a few of his former investment banking colleagues to create this team. And I initially am around that team because I'm the IT guy looking at acquisitions and how we might integrate them from a technology perspective, and got to know the team a little better. And they said, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you get off the IT track and come onto the M&A track, and you'll take a little half step back in your career, but you'll work with us on these deals. You get some great experience." I said, "Great, let's do it. Where do I sign?" So I became an M&A guy, left IT, became an M&A guy, very fortunate for that opportunity. Never would have happened anywhere else because I didn't have much finance experience at all. And they just took a chance on me based on my reputation and my interest. So worked in Technicolor for many years in M&A, and very exciting time. We studied the digital out of home advertising space really closely, and went out and bought 3 companies for $400 million. And we did some work on the sell side. We sold RCA, the kind of iconic American brand. And I fell in love with M&A. These were the most intelligent, motivated people I'd ever been around. And I just fell in love with the work, and really, really loved it. But I did not love the fact that I was working 90, 100-hour weeks every week. And that's just kind of what it was in this group, which was really a lot less work than the investment bankers were used to working 120 plus hours a week. So this was a lifestyle move for them to come into this group and only work 90.
Right.
I loved it, but it was not going to be sustainable for me long term. I met my now wife, and I wanted to have a family and wanted to have some more balance in my life. So I was turning 40, and I just decided, I could probably go get another corporate job somewhere else and figure it out. But I want to, at this point in my career, I've done enough consulting and I have enough experience that I want to give myself a shot to put it all together and see if I can do it on my own. So 10 years ago, I left, started Kinected, joined a few networking groups around town. I joined Provisors and a UCLA networking group called Bruin Professionals, and started to meet CPAs and transactional attorneys that have clients in the lower middle market, which I see as $5 to $50 million deal value. And there really aren't a lot of options. It's kind of an underserved market for M&A advisors that serve that space. There's a lot of big investment bankers working on $200 million deals, and there's a lot of kind of Main Street type business brokers, but there aren't a lot of advisors with professionalism from big deal experience and M&As, and know how to give client service and understand the deal process. So that's really been the market that I've been working in the last 10 years. And kind of a roundabout path to consulting, to corporate M&A, to now doing kind of consulting and strategy consulting and M&A with my own firm.
That's great.
So really great path.
So it was more of a background of consulting. I remember meeting you over at USC about 10 plus years ago. And my recollection was that you had come out of selling a small business, but I didn't know or recall that you had such a large background, large business selling background, RCA, Technicolor, Anderson, big names, obviously. So, but let's get down into the space that I'm in, which is a lot of family businesses. And I know you're helping family businesses transition to the next chapter of their lives.
Yep.
You're quarterbacking that entire process from initial valuation through finding buyers to closing the deal through the transition. And that's really fulfilling, is helping entrepreneurs navigate this very emotional transition. And let's talk about some of the issues or obstacles, or what the thought process is maybe for a family business, because they've got options, hopefully, right? They may have sons or daughters in the business that they can transition the business to, or they're thinking maybe I need to create some optionality and have outside buyers. What are those conversations or decisions in that thought process? What's that like for them? And with you, by their side, counseling them.
The family dynamic has so many interesting, unusual kind of aspects to it. A lot of times when I see these family businesses, I see a lot of family members that are dramatically underpaid or dramatically overpaid relative to what the market would normally bear. So those are kind of some unusual issues. And a lot of times the family working in the business, they don't want the business to be sold because, maybe if the new buyer wouldn't respect those salary levels. So that's kind of one issue that we tend to see. Also siblings may often fight for control. That's kind of a well-documented trope in our culture that we see a lot of that. A lot of times, if there's multiple family members, then maybe there's a disagreement on the next chapter and should we sell, should we not sell? I've certainly seen that. I think, ultimately it's a very personal decision. Every family is different. But I do find it incredibly rewarding to kind of, meet a family or maybe a couple that's looking to retire, and this whole M&A process to them is just really a black box. They don't really understand what it looks like. There's so much misinformation that's out there in terms of valuation and how the process works. So it's just very rewarding to meet a family that has a lot of questions, a lot of anxiety about a process, and then to really hold their hand and chart a way through it and bring on the right partners to help them through this, and then to see them get on the other side to start their next chapter. It's very rewarding, and it's really why we do what we do.
So when you're with and you talk about a family business helping them sell, is it your experience that you're mostly sitting with one or two family members? Maybe it's the mother, father, if it's or two brothers, or do they bring other family members to the table to understand this black box and this process, or are they leaving them in the dark? Is it both sides of the?
I think it's like very unique. I mean, every family runs it a little bit differently.
Right.
I worked on a sale of a plumbing company a couple years ago and really was just dealing with the patriarch in that case. He was really calling all the shots.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did another deal for a label printing company, and that was just all hands on deck. And we had, 9 people in the room in that initial meeting. So I've seen it handled, and it's just a very personal decision of which way to go. So I think, my job is really just try to be a consigliere to the family and help them figure out, what the right path for them is. And if we take it, if they end up wanting to take it to market, then, we're gonna find them the right buyer that's gonna respect the family legacy, try to keep, the employees, respect the employees and respect the customers, and really just respect the traditions that companies built over often many decades. And that's generally the highest priority for the families, is they want to take care of the surviving employees. They want to take care of the customers. They want to walk away with a nice valuation so they don't have to go back into the family business and they can live comfortably. But yeah, we work to really balance all of those different competing objectives.
So if you were standing as a speaker in front of a family business audience talking about selling their business, would you advise them one way or another about who to bring to the table, how to keep this deal so that it doesn't get stuck between family members, or stuck because the patriarch is trying to make all the decisions? Do you have an axe to grind in this conversation, in this thing?
I just think it's so case by case basis. It's
Yeah.
really hard kind of paint it with a broad brush here. I think you generally want the owners. I'm hired by the owners of the company generally to kind of help them figure out their options. So it's not really my call. And if we want to bring in maybe some relatives that are not driving the bus, so. But I'll work with whatever team they want us to work with and have the right discussions.
Okay. So what are some of the most frequently asked questions that you get from either a family or a non-family business as they approach this decision to sell? Because it's a complex one.
It's very complex. Yeah.
What are some common, frequently asked questions?
Yeah. I mean, the questions are what's my business worth?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously valuation's a huge driver, but oftentimes business owners are walking around with wildly unrealistic valuation expectations. It's maybe they heard something from their friend at the country club, or they see a publicly traded company that's trading at 50 times earnings, or they hear about a company that sells as a multiple of revenue. So we have to really educate them and show some data on, here's what a business like yours has sold for in the past. And based on our conversations with buyers, here's where the market is right now. So we do a lot of education around valuation, talk a lot about what is this process going to look like. Sellers sometimes feel that if they are courted by a buyer, then, that buyer is going to do the right thing and follow through. And that's, sometimes the case, but often not the case. We see a lot of sellers that are lured in by buyers that, they get an unsolicited offer and they want to go explore that offer, and then they're not prepared to really optimize that process because maybe the business isn't prepared properly, their books are not in shape that they're going to survive diligence, they don't have a transactional attorney, they're relying on maybe an estate planning attorney they used in the past. It's not a transactional attorney. So there's quite a lot of prep that needs to go into selling the business, and a lot of our early discussions are focused on an assessment. If you were to sell today, here's the likely outcome. However, if you were willing to go get your books put on a GAAP basis, and you could go hire this key person over here, and if you could document your processes, then for example, you can move from a 5 multiple to a 7 multiple of earnings. Those are the kind of things that we do. We have a process called Exit Boost where we walk our clients through the M&A process and can work with them over a period of time to get the business ready.
Would you say that there's an ideal amount of time to prepare to sell your business? It seems to me that my experience has been about 9 months is probably about the average, but so
I think that's a really good number. I would agree with that. I think it's minimum 6 months. It really depends on the number one driver is what's the quality of your books. Do you already have a CPA that is getting you or CFO? Can you produce a very comprehensive monthly reporting package? Do you know your margins by product line, by geography, by customer? Can you answer those questions? Because we know buyers are sophisticated. They are going to hire third parties and they're going to go under the covers and they're going to look at every number in the last several years of your financials. And your story needs to hold together, and you better be able to kind of explain any inconsistencies or deviations from the tax returns. And we work to make sure that story and those financials are bulletproof. That's the worst thing that would happen on a deal is you get to the you're in a process and you've already narrow the field down from 30 buyers to 6 buyers and narrow it down to 1 buyer. And then they're doing their due diligence. And then they find some accounting irregularity and your earnings are not 3 million. Now they're 1.5 million. And now the buyer has every opportunity to renegotiate and potentially walk away. So that's the worst thing that can happen. And we definitely want to make sure that doesn't happen. So we want the books to be super, super tight. We also want to have a transactional attorney get involved and look at the agreements before we go to market, get a sense of what the transferability is going to look like. Any kind of customer agreements that might need to be transferred. We want to know ahead of time what that process is going to look like. We definitely want key employees to be retained and have retention packages. And there's several things that do go into the process, but I would agree 9 months is a pretty good expectation to set.
Now, I've often done some analysis of a few companies I've looked at, and my conclusion was always the number one thing that would drive their multiple or the valuation would be if they grew larger. And most of these were probably sub $10 million revenue. Earlier in your bio, you said that you were mostly focused on 5 to 20 million in enterprise value, if I heard you correctly.
5 to 50.
5 to 50, yeah. Sorry. So at $5 million in enterprise value, they're probably well over $20 million in annual revenues. But it seems to me that there's the lower part of the middle market, the 10 to $20 million, like they need to get over that certain revenue threshold to be more valuable. And that's the number one thing. Has that been your experience as well?
I would say there's different kind of tiers.
Right.
From my experience, we're interested in businesses that are generating about at least $1 million of EBITDA, pretty predictable $1 million, because at that point, they become very good add-ons for private equity firms that are already in the space. So I think that's one tier of multiple, about 1 million. Once you get to 2 million EBITDA, I think the multiples will generally increase. And once you get to 5 million would be the next tier. And at that point, a lot of private equity firms will consider you to be a platform investment. And at that point, they're willing to pay a larger premium because that gets them in the space, and then they can go, build out their platform and go find add-ons to increase the overall multiple of the platform.
Yeah. And what if a company is a very unique business. It's not like a plumbing or a landscaping or a maintenance or a service company. These become very difficult to sell, I would imagine. Do most M&A investment bankers shy away from those, or do
I
they
mean,
have a
you know,
different approach?
it depends on what this company, what role they play, you know, and how important are they, and how important are their uniquenesses. If they're, you know, if they manufacture some, you know, if they're an aerospace parts manufacturer and they have a 10-year agreement to fulfill some of a Northrop's planes, you know,
Right.
that could be a great business, right?
Sure.
If they're like designed in, that could be a great business. I'm certainly not shying away from that. I think there's potentially a premium. Really, what buyers want most is predictability.
Right.
So if they, you know, produce something that's really not that important, yeah, that's if it's a commodity that they produce, I don't think there's going to be a lot of demand. But if they have something truly unique that their customers need and it's very hard to substitute, then I would argue that they're worth a premium.
Yeah. So I want to get into talking about examples of past wins. But I'm wondering, have there been cases where you've gone to market where you've gotten very few applicants? Because I work with a lot of clients on hiring the right people, and several of my clients right now are struggling to find employees. We all know that it's a tight job market. Are there times where you get very few buyers to come to the table, and now you have to rethink, like, what's our approach here? Like, we don't have 30 to narrow down to 6 to choose one.
Yeah.
We've got, just
You
a
know, I
couple.
would say in the last like 4 years, it's been I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, but I'd say specifically over the last 4 years, it's been a pretty good market for the deals that I've had. You know, we had a really fantastic success story in e-commerce in 2020 during COVID.
Hmm.
This was a company, e-commerce was one of the darling sectors of during COVID, and this company grew their earnings significantly, and we had $100 million plus sale on this company. It was a really rare situation. I had a plumbing deal, and that appealed to a very broad constituency of buyers around the country.
Sure.
We had a healthcare deal in the clinical trial space, and there was a lot of demand. It's private equity is definitely aggressively looking at that space. I sold an IT managed service provider company last year, and that one had a lot of interest. So I don't know, maybe I've just been lucky, but I really try to work with businesses that I think are going to generate a lot of interest. If
Yeah.
I'm skeptical, and I'm probably not going to take the deal. And one of the things we're most proud of is the fact that we have an 87% close rate, and that's just we're only looking for 2 to 4 deals a year, and I want to make sure when I work with those companies that we're going to sell those businesses, and we're going to find the right buyer.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
let's
yeah.
talk about some wins that you've had. Maybe if there's a family business story that's particularly applicable, but maybe your favorite client that you worked with that you sold, or a great success story, something you overcame.
Yeah, well,
Give us a
yeah, we'll
case
talk
study.
about two. So this e-commerce company was really, really interesting. This is a referral through my Provisors network that I received in 2017.
Mm,
Uh,
wow.
Developed a relationship with this company. They're a UK-based lifestyle and apparel company, 90% e-commerce, 10% wholesale. And they just had a passionate following they developed. They really served their market really well. When I met this business, it was probably worth about 20 million. And then when we finally brought in the fractional CFO and got the audits done and the quality of earnings done, we were around 10 million EBITDA. Probably would have valued it, 60 to 70 million. And we went to market, and I reached out to 275 buyers for this one. I'm not kidding. I kept a pretty good records. Very tough business. Just you look at the website, it was kind of an alternate lifestyle. I'd say like aggressive piercings and tattoos, and some buyers are conservative and weren't willing to. It was also during COVID, so a lot of buyers were very skeptical about what's going to happen in the space, and they're just taking a cautious view. But when we went to market, our earnings kept growing, and we ended up getting 111 million for this company, and it was just a great win for everybody involved. and just a wonderful business that just really understood their customer and real willing to partner with us, willing to take advice. They took a big leap of faith, and we encouraged them. Got to bring in the fractional CFO. We got to get the audits done. We got to get the quality of earnings done, reports done. And this was in the US and the UK. So it was quite a bit of prep work, and it took some time, but definitely all of
4 years or 3.
Yeah, it took about 9 months, to your point. So that's what it took. And we went to market, and went to market in April of 2020, right when COVID was really kicking in. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but we agreed to just go for it and see what buyers would say, and close the deal in November. And it was just a wonderful experience, start to finish, with a great client, and they're doing well.
But you said you met them in 2017 or got the introduction. So there was something that happened in the 2.5 years leading up to.
Yeah, when I met them, it was kind of like, let's just build the relationship. They were very clear that they had a 3-year plan, that they were going to run this, they were going to grind for 3 more years and then sell this thing. And
got it.
Pretty special company. So that was great. And then another experience that I really treasure was, last year I sold a IT managed service provider. Those are very hot right now, just given the recurring revenue dynamic of it. A lot of buyers around the country for those kind of businesses. But I met this company several years before, and their financials were not in great shape when I initially met them. And I told them, they were project based at the time. They weren't recurring revenue. They had their margins were nowhere near in line with industry norms. I said, hey guys, look, we gotta transition this business to get some recurring revenue. These are going to be some painful conversations, but you have to do it. This is where the industry is going, and your margins are not in line. It seems like you might have some underperforming employees here that are carrying a lot of weight. And I kept in touch with them, and then they came back to me, end of 22, and a radically different business. They did the work, and they had recurring revenue, and they had a very lean and effective team, and it was a great thing for their morale, and they were peaking. And they came back, and they were ready to go, and they had a lot of anxiety about the process, but we ran a really good process, got a lot of buyers involved. They got their pick of the buyer, and they put as much emphasis on the culture of the buyer as they did on the valuation. They really wanted somebody that was going to respect their employees. And I mean, more than a lot of businesses I see, that was really a driver for them. And then to get to the other side of it, and they were just so appreciative. They were so appreciative every step of the way, but especially when we finished and everything went really well and pretty smoothly. And this is, about a year ago, and we're actually going to have dinner tomorrow night, and we're just staying in touch. And these are just, you kind of just develop lifelong relationships through these processes. You develop a pretty intimate relationship with your clients, and it just feels so good to be that person to help them transition. And now they're, off to the next chapter and starting to travel and do things they've never had a chance to do before. So to me, that's what I find especially rewarding.
Great success story. What are some of the misconceptions in M&A work that clients have prospective clients have as they come to you?
Yeah, I'll give you a few. The number one thing I hear is that, I have so much potential in my business, and a buyer could do so much with it. Well, then the buyer's going to say, well, why didn't you do that?
Right.
So buyers are not really paying for potential. They're starting their valuations based off of past performance generally, unless you can paint a very clear picture of what the future looks like. Maybe you have some contracts that are set to start, and you can kind of layer in that value. But the starting place for the negotiation is, how has this business performed in the past? And that's
a great one. Yeah.
For my segment. Number two, a lot of sellers are thinking that they're going to get their business is going to trade on a multiple of revenue. I heard that today for a company I talked to, and it's a plumbing supplies wholesaler. That business is not going to trade on a multiple of revenue. That's going to be a multiple of EBITDA. And then their books, we have tax returns. What else does the buyer need to see? No. We need to see accrual-based P&L. We need to understand, if there's any personal expenses which are in the business. It's okay. Let's identify those, and as long as we can support them, then we can probably get you credit for the vast majority of those personal expenses. So yeah. So, and then another.
Let's go back to the tax returns. So
Yeah.
they think that the tax returns is a legitimate way for someone to evaluate, well, this is what we're reporting to the government, so this is what.
Yeah, and it is a starting point, but a buyer is going to need much more information to really. And if you want maximum value, then we need much more deeper information than the tax return is going to provide. I need
Sure.
to know, gross profit by segment, by product line, by customer. I need to know revenue by customer. I just need to go to a much more level of management reporting. I need monthly financials every month. And as we get into a process, those need to be updated on a trailing 12-month basis.
Mm-hmm.
So the tax return might be a starting point, but certainly if you want maximum value, then we got to go much, much, much deeper and be able to produce some kind of management reporting and KPIs to really show that this business is healthy. A lot of times the tax returns on a cash basis, which is fine. But more often than not, the seller is going to get more value by producing books on a GAAP basis. And also, that's how a buyer is going to value the business as well. Buyer most often is going to be running on a GAAP basis, so they're going to want to see what that looks like to them. And that's really what the picture is what are these financials going to look like in the eyes of the buyer?
So let's explain what a GAAP basis is. You're from Anderson, you know what that
Sorry, yeah,
means.
generally
Most people probably don't. Yeah.
Generally accepted accounting principles. So,
which means what in plain speak?
Sorry, yeah, I tend to do that. Yeah, like for example, if you have lease obligations that go into the future, well, that's a liability.
Right.
Some businesses they take deposits. I see a lot of businesses that report those deposits as revenue. Well, technically, that's not your money until you deliver the service, so that's a liability.
Right.
So these are the type of adjustments that need to be made on the financial statements before you show them to a buyer. And I don't want to set the seller's expectations of value if the buyer is going to look at it differently. You got to really look at it how a buyer is going to look at this. So that's a misconception. Another one is that I see so many sellers that are just lured in. There's the private equity world has gotten so competitive, and they are now just buying lists and blanketing business owners with just junk mail. Just basically, hey, we've been doing a lot of research. We found your company. We're prepared to pay this. And they don't even really know a lot about your company.
Right.
And sellers get lured in by this. Oh, they really want me. And then if you look at the offers that they're getting, they tend to be very little cash at closing. They tend to be earnout driven. Maybe they're going to give you some stock of their company, which is very illiquid and hard to value. And then also when you have one buyer on the hook, what's that buyer's incentive to pay a competitive valuation? And what's that buyer's incentive to move? So I see a lot of sellers get stuck in that trap of working with one buyer. If anything, that's probably one of the largest values that besides the experience and holding a seller's hand and running the process for them. By allowing us to create a competitive process, that's the best way to know that you're getting the best possible value at the same, we want to run multiple buyers through the process at the same time. We create very well-prepared marketing materials, and then we give buyers additional information along the way as the process becomes more competitive. And that's really the best way to drive value. But unfortunately, some sellers feel that they can handle it themselves. And they have a buyer on the hook, so that's probably going to be a great deal. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you really don't know until you really run a process.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me. I don't see that many real estate properties selling for sale by owner, and I just can't imagine business owners doing that same thing. But there's always those that exist. I'm sure.
I would say, from my experience, there are, I'd say 5% of business owners that can do it. But you know what? It's a giant distraction. We spend.
Huge. Yep.
1,000 hours on a deal. I mean, that's really what it takes to get a deal done through a professional process with expertly prepared marketing materials. I mean, that's what it takes. So I don't know how many business owners have 1,000 hours to spare on top of running their business optimally.
Let's talk about how distracting it is in general to sell their business, even when they are working with you. How much time do you think that they put in that takes them away from the day-to-day operations of running their business?
I mean, our job is to minimize that as much as possible. And that's why the key person that they need on their team is going to be somebody internally, a fractional CFO, expert controller, somebody that can really make sure that any financial questions can be answered quickly. That's really where the bulk of the time takes.
Sure.
So it's always an interesting question on the seller side, who needs to be brought into the fold. So, anybody that needs to be brought into the circle of trust, they need to be retained. There needs to be retention packages put in place for those people, because those are very key people to get the deal done, and then also post closing. So I know the sellers, definitely we do a pretty good job of getting buyers in the process. And at a certain point, once we have the initial indications of interest and we narrow down the field to real credible buyers, then those buyers are going to want to talk to the management team. So we structure those, we do management meetings. That will definitely take some time. There's certainly some upfront time in preparing the business, going through the financials, make sure that we understand the business intelligently enough that we can document it all in our marketing materials, the SIM and the teaser, confidential. The SIM's the confidential information memorandum, and
Right.
those tend to be 30 to 50 page documents that really describe the business in detail. And our job is to convey as much information as required to allow the buyer to make a credible offer. We don't want to get deep in a process for the buyer to find out that, there's a customer that has, 40% of the sales, total sales, that's called customer concentration. And we want to disclose all the material points about that business up front. So there's definitely a few week process that we need to spend a lot of time with the sellers to get the knowledge transfer so we can expertly represent the business. But it is distraction. It's emotionally distracting more than anything, because it's something that's always on a seller's mind. Where are we in the process? Why is it taking so long? What's happening? And these processes are time consuming. On average, our processes take about 8 to 9 months. I've done them as fast as 5 months, but those are special. Usually they're 8 to 10 months, I would say.
Yeah.
And our job is to keep the seller psychologically focused and running the business while we kind of do the heavy lifting of pushing the deal along.
And for the deals that you've done, what percent or how many of them require the owner or the key managers to stay on for, and how long? 6 months, a year, 2 years? What's been your experience based in that area?
I'm seeing 12 months as the median of what is asked. And then generally, if the business is selling to somebody that's already in the industry, one way or another, the seller, that 12-month commitment, it can taper off over that 12 months. So maybe it's full time for the first 6 months, and then it's 2 hours less per week each month. There,
it's generally full time for those 12 months.
For the first 6 months, I would say is pretty customary.
Okay.
And definitely the management team, they're going to be expected to stay. So that's a whole other topic. Is
of course,
how do you incentivize that management team to stay for the seller? You definitely want that transition to go well.
Right. And in the process of selling, do you find that some managers think that they need to jump ship because this thing is for sale and it's going to be a change in management, might not like the management? I mean, especially in a family business where they've maybe been treated like family and there's like a sense of loyalty there. They overlook maybe lack of accountability or certain behavioral quirks, but now it's like a corporate buyer. It's a whole new sheriff in town. Do they bolt?
Yeah, that's a delicate situation, right? And I think a lot of family members, maybe aren't so supportive of a sale because they know they're going to be held to a different standard. But
sure.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's just so specific. I mean, maybe the family business owners are micromanagers and they're pushing the family harder than they would push other employees. I've seen that as well. So I don't know, but generally, you want to make sure that the seller really knows the buyer's culture and can paint a good picture for the remaining employees for how this is going to benefit them. A lot of times the buyer's company is a lot larger and it's going to create a lot more growth opportunities for the employees. And oftentimes their benefit packages are better. We see that a lot too. So there can be a lot of upside for for employees of sellers organizations, but it's definitely something we want to really communicate carefully and thoughtfully before closing.
Well, I think it's interesting. When I was in business school, and this is many years ago, and maybe this is an M&A misconception, but the conception was that most M&A deals fail. And it was because of cultural integrations. And I imagine that that research was based on, and I don't remember the data, but the research was based on large companies like HP and Compaq, trying to merge, or, larger companies. Do you see that as is there some data around M&A failures versus successes, or yeah?
I've seen the same data, and that was, we definitely had some deals at Technicolor that I worked on that we baked in all these optimistic projections of what the synergies we're going to do, and we were going to be able to cross sell. And I would say that, more often than not, those didn't come to pass.
Yeah.
So I would say I have kind of a similar experience on the deal side that I'm in now, the lower middle market. I think by and large, the integration has gone pretty well. I mean, there's definitely been a couple times where maybe the buyer was very, very hungry to buy a business. You kind of see this a lot. We have these search funds that are out there, and their whole reason for being is they want to go buy a business, and they're so hungry that they get kind of lost in it, that they're not. That sometimes they don't really understand the culture, they don't really understand the business as well. They just want to get a deal done. They just want to buy a business. So
Yeah.
those are the ones I think are the most difficult for transitions to happen successfully.
Okay, as we wrap this up now, but are there any exit planning steps that we haven't really covered that we should be covering, or do you want to take us through maybe high level exit planning steps?
Yeah. So great question. Thank you. We have a process called Exit Boost, where we take the sellers through a step-by-step approach to getting their business ready to sell for maximum value. So we start with evaluation, and we look at the financials very closely. We look at where that company compares to its industry peers. We're looking at the quality of the team. We're looking at the macro environment. We're looking at projections of where we think this company can go over the next few years. And we're also introducing them to other deal professionals that we've worked with that are vetted, such as fractional CFOs, transactional attorneys, wealth managers, different people, business consultants that specialize in family businesses. These are people that become a core part of the deal team. And we introduce those people at the right time to make sure that the business is ready, and more importantly, that the owners are psychologically ready. I mean, that is probably one thing that doesn't get discussed enough, is that if we try to force a business sale when the sellers aren't psychologically ready, that deal process is not going to go well. That deal process will fall apart for some reason. We definitely want to make sure that sellers are financially ready, which means they can afford to sell the business. The business is going to attract enough after-tax proceeds that they will achieve their financial objectives. So there's the financial part of it, and then there's the emotional part of it. A lot of times these businesses become a part of their identity. So when you sell your business, what are you going to do next? What does that look like for you? And we need our sellers to have a pretty clear picture of what that next chapter looks like for them. Hopefully they're running to their next thing and they're not running away from their business, because that's a red flag. And I've seen it happen. It's actually pretty tragic, but I have 4 examples of sellers that have passed away within 2 years of selling their business. I think some of those didn't have a clear path of what they really wanted to do next, and their business was more a part of their identity than they even realized.
Huge problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. So yeah, definitely it's the psychological readiness is also a huge part of this that I think doesn't get talked about enough.
Great. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. And if people want to get a hold of you, they can find you at Kinected Advisors, and that's Kinected, KINECTED.com. Or I'm sure on LinkedIn, Kevin Berson, BERSON. Kevin, thanks so much. Gave us some real insights into the M&A process. You have a very impressive background. And folks, if Kevin can be of use to you, or if you're looking to prepare your business and you're not ready to talk to an M&A advisor, we're here to help you drive value in your business and get you ready to be positioned for a sale. So, the drill. If you like this show, please give us a good rating on your podcast listening application of choice. Share it with others, and stay tuned for future episodes of the Disruptive Successor Show.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.